You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Angel Rose and Ahanu.
You are very welcome. I am Ahanu, and this is my lovely Angel Rose. And today we have something very different for you. We're sitting in County Wicklow with Una and Kevin O'Kelly. And Una and Kevin have a beautiful daughter by the name of Catherine, who they are unschooling. And Angel Rose is going to give us a quick little introduction as to what that is, and then we'll hear more about it from Una and Kevin.
I can't really define what it is exactly, huh? That's why we're going to interview.
It sounds intriguing,
Kevin
though, doesn't it?
But they are homeschooling, but they are doing it in a way where there is no curriculum that she has to learn. They're not having to submit anything to any authorities. And so what we're witnessing is a little 7-year-old girl who is bright as a button, mature, self-sustaining,
Absolutely,
and highly creative. So we wanted to interview Kevin and Catherine to find out exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it and how that is going down in Ireland. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned, have a listen.
Okay, so education, helping children grow. There's a variety of different ways of doing that. School is one that grew up because it was better than what was there before, which was basically people not learning an awful lot. Homeschooling is kind of an improvement on that, where the school curriculum is something that is looked after in people's own homes, and provided parents are okay with keeping up or keeping ahead of the lessons, then that can work very well. That the same content tends to be delivered at a better pace, at a better time for the children, more respectful of their energy. So I'd see homeschooling as being, in general, a step up from standard schooling. Now, not everybody can manage to do it. You know, the schools still have their place. But what we're doing here is actually a different one again. We're doing unschooling, which is basically leaving the curriculum out of it completely. And this really comes from a very different fundamental view of what a young person is, who they are, which is a person who is gifted with their own purpose, with their own interests, with their own passions, with their own patience, with their own, so many different characteristics, and they're very individual to the child. And the child doesn't need to be taught about that. The child has so many questions. In fact, it's ironic that what happens in school sometimes is that the children with loads and loads of questions get lined up in rows and benches and told to listen to somebody else's idea of what they're supposed to be learning, when they have so many questions that they want answered themselves. They seem to be more efficient at learning when they follow their own agenda. They know what they want to learn. They know how to do it. They know basically how to make the best of their environment. So all we really need to do is manage that environment. Now, what we do is we make a kind of a target-rich environment. And one of the theory developers on this called zones of proximal development. You put them into a particular environment and then they develop in a particular way. So you surround them with music and musical instruments, they'll learn music. You surround them with Lego, they'll learn engineering, they'll learn mathematics, they'll learn, you give them a leisure centre, they'll learn to swim. Why? Because they want to. It's fun. It's great to learn. They see other people wanting to read. They'll learn to read because they want to. Now, sometimes it does mean that they don't follow the same standards and measurement forms as other people. Things like, what would an average 7-year-old be doing at a particular stage? Something that really doesn't concern us. I would say, like in terms of reading, Catherine's reading is not as advanced as one of her cousins, who's very slightly older, 3 weeks older than her. But she wants to read. She reads because she wants to, not because she has to. Now, that, I think, sure, at some stage she'll catch up with her cousin. But hopefully the motivation to read will have stayed there. So that's really what we're trying to work with, is we're following the motivation and trying to look at that as being not just something that the economic system determines what should be taught in schools, to help people become good, productive members of society. In fact, I remember nearly walking out in a speech when a minister came to open a building in the college I was teaching in at the time, which was a College of Art and Design, and made a wonderful speech about how these new students were going to be great contributions to the economy and great producers of wealth. And that was the sole focus of what he was at. And if it wasn't for me needing to bite my tongue so as to not embarrass my boss, I'd probably have made a speech from the back of the hall about what exactly an art college is about. Meaning, beauty, truth, communication. It's about the spirit, it's about the heart, it's about so many things other than just production. In fact, in the same way that agricultural production got to be looked after by machines, industrial production, again, more machines. Now, some of the intellectual work is being done by artificial intelligence. Great. If it can be done by a machine, let it be done by a machine. Because the work of caring, the work of loving, the work of making the world a more compassionate kind of a place cannot be done by a machine. Children know this. They want to grow up in a world where people care. Like when you hear about these major disasters going on and, even sort of looking at 9/11 and the messages that came on people's phones when they knew the planes were going to crash and things like that. It wasn't about sell this or buy that or, look after the, it was wanting to bring the people that they loved to say goodbye, because that's the most important thing. Even the people who need to send children to school, very often, why do they do it? Because they have to go to work. They have to go out to pay their mortgage. Why? Because that's providing the solid base for the people to grow up in. They're doing these things that in some ways can separate them from the children because they love the children. Now, that's the fundamental work of the human being, to love and to care and to be most fully who they are and who they're created to be. I think we can do that better at home than they can in a school. The poor school teachers, they're so overloaded. If you have a look, the average class in Ireland is somewhere in the region of 28 to 30 students. Can be significantly more in some schools. If you divide the teacher's time between start time and finish time, not even allowing for other activities and discipline problems and things like that, that amounts to somewhere less than 10 minutes per student in the course of the day. It's too little.
Well, not only that, the amount of homework they send them home with too is like another full day of school. And I've never agreed with that. In fact, that was the reason I failed most classes when I was younger. It's because I wouldn't do homework.
Yes.
So,
I think that was very wise.
And it's worse now. It's absolutely worse. Mm-hmm. And I was somebody who hated school because it was unnatural for me. It was hard for me to sit in a desk for X amount of hours. Mm-hmm. The only classes I ever enjoyed is when I went outside and sat under a tree.
And you probably learned more of what you learned that way than what you were forced to sit and do.
Well, I would probably be your typical attention deficit disorder child now, because I could not sit still. I did not enjoy it at all. And so, I actually felt a lot of sadness when I had to put my kids in school. Because I just didn't know any other way. So when my children were probably 15, 16, they wanted to be homeschooled. But I didn't know enough at the time to teach them anything. Okay, so it all worked out. It turns out there was a home study, homeschool curriculum where they just sent you the books, and I had a friend who was a math tutor. So that worked out. But it's kind of like childbirth. Back in the day, they told us the Lamaze method was natural. I don't know if you remember. And, of course, I had my son that way, and it was not natural in the least. I was still hooked up to all these monitors and wires. So I had my last two children at home, as you did. Totally different. So I equate education the same. And everything you're saying, it's the difference between natural and unnatural, or sane versus insane. And the way we are with our children is insane, just the way it is in America. I won't bring up a discussion on vaccinations, but let me just say that it's quite insane, that whole process. So I'm so curious as to how you're getting away with this with the government and the education system.
In Ireland, it's not a matter of getting away with it.
It's legal.
It's
It
legal.
is not only legal, it is actually built into the fundamental approach to education. When you look at the Irish Constitution, home education is mentioned before school.
The parents are the
The parents are the primary educators of the child. So we have a constitutional right to educate Catherine ourselves. Now, there is a check, because people could go away and claim to be educating the children themselves and neglecting them. That is something the government doesn't want to do, so they do actually assess the parents initially to see, are they prepared to be educating a child? And once the parents pass the initial assessment, then they may come back at later stages and just see that the child is actually benefiting from the education. But it is up to the family themselves to decide what the content of that education is. We do not need to follow anybody else's curriculum or their particular methods or approach or anything like that. Each individual family can decide for themselves. And I think that's far better, because the needs of different families are going to be different. If you've got somebody who has got something that would be labelled as attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, maybe they're just a kinesthetic learner that needs to be out doing things rather than... that's making a clicking noise, Catherine. Maybe they need to be doing things rather than sitting, paying attention to what somebody else is presenting. So it's a very different, very individual thing. If you've got a family where there's somebody with autism, especially high-functioning autism, maybe there's a very particular approach. Maybe they need to be at home, because just going out from the home or having visitors in the home is just simply too disruptive. There is no standard recipe. Basically, what we have to do is to follow the recipe that's in her heart. She's arrived with her own particular individual way of being, her own individual purpose, and it's a sacred gift to be asked to look after and nurture this little person and to provide for her education.
Okay, so like the normal person, the normally programmed person would want to know, what about her social interaction with other children? How do you address that?
It's interesting that this is one of the first problems that a lot of people raise, and I would say that her social interaction is actually vastly superior to most people of her age cohort, for the simple reason that in schools what happens is that people are gathered together into single age group cohorts that do not generally optimally interact with other ages, let alone with adults. In a home education gathering, and these things happen very frequently, several times a week on a good week. Sometimes, that's too much activity. Catherine says, "Dad, can we just have an at-home day?" And, we will go out meeting people. Sometimes Catherine's looking after the babies. Sometimes she's playing with the 5-year-olds. One of her best friends is 5. And other times she's going around with the teenagers and meeting people, doing things. Even sort of talking to a group of adults. I was at a meeting some time ago, and Catherine came up with some very good ideas. So I asked Catherine to introduce them. She stood quite confidently in front of a group of 20-something adults and explained what her idea for redesigning the playground in their office block was. Now, that level of confidence, that level of communication, that level of socialisation doesn't happen by accident. It happens because children are naturally social beings. But the interaction between the age groups seems to me to be very much more like real life, very much more wholesome, very much better for character development in general than the artificial environment, which basically, I don't know if you know Animal Farm, the book from long ago. A lot of schools are generating that kind of Animal Farm situation in classrooms over and over again and not realising that it's simply not working.
Let me ask a question of you, Una, because I'm trying to think ahead, perhaps some years ahead, and I'm wondering if you might have any fears of, say, Catherine being able to get a good job in the marketplace because you're homeschooling her now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand that you would consider that it's the best thing and the right thing to do now, but thinking into the future, like, do you foresee that there might be a possibility of regret ever about this?
At the moment, I don't think so, and I don't anticipate that there will be, because our focus is on education as the whole person, not just the
Right.
academic thing in isolation. Because I think she'll manage the academic piece very well.
Right.
And I don't think there'll be a difficulty with that bit. Whereas I would regret maybe more of the kind of the personal development and the spiritual development and the mental and emotional development. And I think by home educating, we're able to give those aspects as much of a focus and a priority as the kind of the reading, writing, and the maths.
Right. Okay.
She obviously loves the camera. Don't you want to ask Catherine a question?
I'd love to hear her. I'd love to hear her speaking. 'Cause,
She's just dying to say something.
do you mind if we ask her a
No,
question?
I do not.
All right. Catherine, your dad mentioned that you spoke in front of a group of 25 or 30 people. Can you tell us what that was about?
Well, it was pretty much about, well, I'll tell you firstly about what I was showing. There was kind of outdoors. It was so plain, I literally hated it. There was like different size blocks. So I asked my dad for some paper and a pen, and I literally drew something which was literally amazing and which would be much more fun.
And then you presented it to this group of people.
Yes. And I've obviously, I've seen for a while that I'm actually not afraid of going in front of lots and lots of people, because we go to, I don't know if my dad's told you already, but we've gone to this meeting every year or so for a while now, and every year we have a talent show, and I've performed since I was about 2 or 3 in it. So
she's an old hat.
She's a performer.
And I hope you sent those adults a bill for your consultation. Did you?
Right.
Well, if they build the adventure playground that she suggested in the place where she thought it might be better than the garden that was there, I think that'd be enough reward, wouldn't it? That'd be fun.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I don't have anything to say. So I do have a question. You're probably aware of Summerhill School in England.
Yes.
Can you tell me what you feel about that and how different this approach is? Because I know that A.S. Neil believed that each person had a soul, and that if you just let it alone, it would blossom on its own. And but there still is a school per se,
Yep.
with no curriculum, I understand.
The Sudbury School model is very, very similar to A.S. Neil, and I've actually been involved in some of the meetings setting up a Sudbury School here.
Okay. How do you say that school?
Sudbury.
Spell it for me.
Sudbury.
Is that what you? Is that what you call what you're doing?
No, Sudbury. No,
Okay,
it's
go
not.
ahead.
No, we're not schooling at the moment.
Okay.
Now, the Sudbury School is really a gathering together of children and adults for the purpose of learning. So it is a school in name, but not a school in terms of its curriculum. The curriculum is devised bit by bit. In fact, there's very few bits of structure about it, but the way that it is structured is quite political, with a small p, in that the power relations between the various different participants in the school is all worked out on the fly, where the adults and the children have equivalent votes in saying what's to go on, what's to happen,
Right.
where and when and how. So, in terms of educating for society, it's actually quite advanced. In fact, some of the follow-up that's been done on both Summerhill and Sudbury has been quite interesting to discover that the career prospects for both seem to be particularly good. Now, I did meet some of the people who had been educated in Summerhill, and in general, I've been very impressed with them. They're not people who have been restricted by conformity. They've been people who prepared to get out there and set up separate different careers in yoga, in music, in healing, things that would not be standard type careers. And most of them now would be people that I'd have a great admiration for. The Sudbury School is a little bit different. It's kind of the Sudbury Valley is in the US, and it was the first of the A.S. Neil type school to be set up in the US, and we liked their model, so that's what's been set up in Wicklow now. And it's gradually been growing over the course of the last 2 years, and it is, well, it's a possibility that we might get involved in something like that in the future, but at the moment that's not where Catherine's at. Now, she's not looking for the more structured day-to-day, going out there, going to school kind of experience. And what we're doing at the moment, where we're sort of doing lots of reading, lots of building, lots of artwork, lots of exploring in the forests, lots of
Lego.
lots and
Maternity
lots of
wards with
Lego.
Lego blocks, is that correct? Okay. What would you say to parents who say, I can't afford to stay home with my child, I have to go to work?
Sometimes it has to be done. In terms of what you probably call the opportunity cost of staying at home, it's one entire salary gone. Now, we thought that there may be brothers and sisters. It hasn't happened. So, doing that for one person makes it probably the most expensive education you could think of. But I reckon it's worth it.
I reckon it's worth it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's worth millions.
But if parents do need to go out, I'd say, find the schools, find as good a school as you can, because there are excellent teachers out there. And now a lot of them are overloaded. They're stretched beyond their limits. All it takes is one or two misbehaving children in a class, and they suck so much time from the teacher's availability with the others that it's quite unfortunate. But the teachers are generally getting into teaching because they're highly motivated. They care about the people that they're teaching and they want to do their best. So, if you do have to send your children to school, well, just find a way to go to it.
Where is the Sudbury School located in America? Do you know?
I could find the address and send it on to you.
Could you do that? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, Sudbury Valley is it's the name of the location. That's actually where they get the name of the school.
Let me ask you a question, Kevin. Do you think that the type of unschooling that you're doing now with Catherine, do you think that, let me ask you, what do you see as being the final outcome, the long-term outcome, if everybody was to do it? Like for a nation, for a country?
Well, I'm not sure if everybody did it work really well, because some people do need the schools, but in terms of tailoring the education to meet the needs of the individual child, I would say we'd have a healthier society. I'd say we'd have more caring people. I'd say we'd have a decrease in the level of conflict and dysfunction. If we were to put the resources into things like the psychiatric support for those who are under major stress and things like that, and to make that available within some kind of a structure or system that people could draw on as needed, as long as the difficult cases are looked after in some sort of compassionate, helpful sort of way, I think the result could be a very much healthier society. You have people who are participative with taking responsibility, and in the same way that a lot of third-level educations worldwide are starting to prefer to get home-educated children now because they're already self-directed learners. They don't have to be de-schooled before they can actually start to become independent learners, as is really what's more appropriate in a third-level setting.
What would you, give me an example of somebody that you say would need school?
I'm thinking of a few names, but they're not going to make much sense. But there are people who actually really do very well with structure, who need structure. In fact, I'd nearly go back to sort of a slightly different approach and talk about Carl Jung and his way of dividing people into personality types. Now, he was using whether somebody is introverted or extroverted, whether they're intuitive or sensate in terms of the way they gather their information, whether they base their judgments on feeling or on thinking, and then which of the other two is primary. The judging or the perceiving is the primary of the previous two. And that sets up a grid 4x4, it's 16 personality type grids. Now, some people, they're predominantly the SJ types, who are sensate in their way of dealing with the world and judging. They like things clear cut and crisp. No, they're going to like a curriculum. They're going to like the way they can say, well, this is what I need to know, this is when I need to know it. To put them into the free-flowing side of structure, where the more artistic side and the more musical side is just given free flow, would possibly be as much of a violence to them as doing things the other way around.
So are you saying then that you think the conventional system is appropriate in some cases?
For some, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. For those
But
who,
not for everybody. It certainly
not for
didn't work
everybody.
for me.
No. I would say the conventional approach really does, to work as the way it should, requires much smaller class sizes than we have in most parts of the world, because it takes a bit more individual attention and care. But the structure of curriculum, while it may not be suitable for a lot, is suitable for some.
Now, where does Montessori fit into this picture?
Oh, she was the one who kicked an awful lot of it off. Maria Montessori was a genius. And really, she started so many people thinking in terms of the actual development of the child rather than the needs of the society. Schools, were set up because they needed clerks. They needed people with the numerical skills. They needed people with the literacy skills. Some of which is done by computers now. But the basic, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that was what schools were originally set up for. Whose needs were that serving? If somebody really wanted to be a healer, did that work? Well, they definitely needed those skills, but it wasn't enough. So the development of the educational system has been huge. But what Maria Montessori did was to look at the natural development of the child and look at the way that they will draw on the available resources to meet the needs, what they have. So what she was doing was assembling these vast arrays of toys and resources, books, music, all sorts of things. And basically just making sure that the ones that were available to the child were the ones that were most appropriate for what their questions were, what their thoughts were, what their ideas were. What's interesting is that Montessori herself had actually designed the educational philosophy up to about the age of 25. People think of Montessori, particularly in this country, as being preschool, and Catherine had the benefit of a Montessori preschool. There is a Montessori school not that far from us that only does primary, but the Montessori approach was actually what I was using in college when I was a third level lecturer, where I was providing the tools for people to explore in a variety of different ways what they could think of and what they could do.
All right, one more. What about Rudolf Steiner schools?
Now, those ones I had a bit more mixed feelings on.
We're asking your opinion.
Again, Steiner was what I particularly like about him was the wholeness of his vision of what the human being actually was. However, I have found that there are kind of two camps among the Steiner followers. Some who say, well, Steiner did it this way, so we will do it exactly this way. And others who sort of kind of understand that Steiner kept writing, he kept doing things, he kept thinking things. He virtually contradicted himself in several places because his thought had changed, because his experience had changed. And another set of Steiner followers will follow the inspiration rather than the actual letter of the law. So I don't have that much time for the fixed one.
Okay.
The other one is definitely, it's so whole. It has room for the spiritual, it has room for the artistic, it has room for the athletic, it has room for so
You're
many
talking the
different things.
unschooling now.
No, I'm talking about Steiner.
Oh, you're talking about Steiner. Okay,
Yeah.
You're still talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah. No, Steiner would be one of the inspirations that we'd use in our approach to unschooling.
Okay.
Largely because of the breadth of vision and how he managed to bring that in. And he included, even things like eurythmy, where he was mixing movement and sound in a way that was not conventional dance. Now, we do things like that where we're actually mixing song and Lego. We're mixing some of the television things. We're mixing sort of athletics and biology. One day we went out orienteering, and the weather wasn't particularly good. And Catherine was kind of miserable for the first little bit of the walk until she started getting so angry with the mud that she came out the other side of the anger and realised that the mud was different in different places. And we started exploring the mud as we went. And there was green mud, and there was brown mud, and there was black mud, and there was slippy mud, and there was gooey mud, and sticky mud. By the time we finished, she was singing a song about being the princess of mud. Now, that was learning at its best, because we were looking at the biology of what was making the moss that was gone into the mud. What was the friction coefficient. Now, we didn't use this language, but she was studying the practicality of it. How does landslip work? Why are there landslides in San Diego and things like that? That is based on things like, why is the moisture level in the mud so important for the friction inside the soil? She's learning it practically And that then forms the interest that she can then ask the questions. If she wants to learn more about that, I'm going to have to pass on to somebody who's much more skilled in geology than I am.
So
But
what
we
do
know where
you?
to look for them.
What is your feeling about television and internet? Only because there are parents that don't believe their children should be watching video games or watching television. So, what is your thoughts about that
Well,
in this context of unschooling?
you have to sort of put in a kind of a caveat. I am a former lecturer in information communications technology in an art college.
Okay.
So that biases my background. Provided these things are being used as a proper communications tool, they are wonderful. You can do things with animation that you cannot do with ordinary sort of acted scenes. There are possibilities, there are inspirations, there are so many things that are going on and things like that are creative, they're communicative. There's meaning attached to them. If somebody is stuck in front of a television set for 6 or 7 hours a day, just going, that is not productive. On the other hand, if they watch a drama and say, if they had handled that conflict a little bit differently, they could have sorted it out much quicker. Because we've got somebody who notices things like that.
Yeah, well, usually what I do, which is actually what I mix, is I mix building with TV, because I like Lego and I also like doing TV. So sometimes I watch TV while I do Lego. So I'm pretty much doing engineering while I'm doing screen time.
All right. And one more person.
Now, and the other thing about the internet, I haven't addressed that one.
Yes, go ahead.
Provided safety things are put in place, and this applies with you to television too. Now, we have a separate router that Catherine's little tablet, which is an old iPhone of mine, she links into a different router. The iKids router is specifically designed for children, and it has filters in to make sure that the wrong kind of content doesn't get through. At the moment, she's not allowed to access social media, and won't be until she's actually ready to handle it. So, we do these things in stages, but looking after the basic safety needs and the engagement. But there is so much stuff that is on television and is in computer games that is educationally wonderful. It used to be, now this is quite a long time back, it used to be that computer games were just sort of mental chewing gum, They were shoot 'em up games going from place to place, and sort of, they've advanced so much beyond that. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. There's a lot of good edutainment, as they're calling it now. Where the educators have actually, and sometimes the best educators have actually got in to design some of the games so that skills will be developed as they go. Like, there's one particular, want to tell them about the monster?
Oh yeah, I actually don't watch any video games, but I do actually kind of play one video game, but it's actually educational. How do I say it? Educational. It's called Teach Your Monster to Read, and I have a cute little monster in the game, and it helps me to teach myself to read.
Fantastic.
I've done another one with piano as well, haven't you? With piano music.
Yeah.
Okay, and your opinion on J. Krishnamurti School?
I don't know enough about Krishnamurti to really come in with a good critique, but the few bits that I have read, again, he's got a very whole vision of the human being.
He does.
And that's what I like about the preparedness to develop the spirit, to develop the psychic abilities, which are not covered by many of the other approaches. It's not mentioned that often in Montessori's work. But in Krishnamurti's, he has the space and the time for a lot of non-conventional approaches to education.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Catherine? Or Una?
Do you have anything else you'd like to say about home education, about learning at home?
I definitely say it's amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about it is that I get to see my friends a bit more often.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the friends which go to school I don't see so often.
Okay.
we could spend hours with and have so many questions that we'd love to really ask. But in the interest of time and efficiency, we, I think, have got a really cool insight.
You have a nice beginning.
A super insight
We
into
can
what's...
continue this conversation
We can continue
even
this.
across the water.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
It's a very important conversation and a very joyful one, I have to say. The other day after we left Kevin and Catherine, we talked about you all the way home. We talked about how lovely you were and how smart and mature you were. Just a delight to be with. And so that's why we had to come back and find out more. So here we are.
Okay, thank you very much for entertaining us.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Look forward to the continuing conversation.
Well, there you go. We hope you enjoyed that.
Onward to the enlightened world.
And let's choose the happy dream.
That's right. Take
Unschooling.
and take care of our children.
Unschooling. And
All
take
right,
care of
bye.
the children. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Angel Rose and Ahanu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.